Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar where we are talking about sounds in museums. My name is Jeppe Linegaard. I am the event and project manager at Danish Sound Cluster. I have a background as a sound designer and a TV audio engineer, and today I will be moderating this webinar with a bunch of really clever people who know lots about sound in museums. Um, so I will just share a couple of slides with you. Yes, we are Danish Sound Cluster, and we are here to facilitate the sharing of knowledge, research, and experience. And we are a non-profit membership organization, and we have a wide variety of members, all the way from the hearing aid industry to acoustic material industry to sound experience and audio hardware industry. Today, we are talking about sound in museums, and our first speaker is Johan Arnfeldt from Moesgaard Museum. He will be giving us a presentation of how they do exhibitions with sound at Moesgaard Museum, also with some of the dogmas and limitations you're working under when you are working in a museum space. Now we should have had Simon Marksen from Yoke, but he called in ill very late. So we are very fortunate to have what I would say is probably an upgrade from a creative director to a CEO at Yoke. He's Jesper Harding, who's also a founding partner. And Yoke is an exhibition and experience design studio working especially with museums. And we have not only one, but actually two replacements for Simon at Yoke. Alexander Rue is joining us. He is a sound designer and multimedia artist. He has been working very closely together with Yoke. And he will be talking about one of the projects that he's worked with in collaboration with Yoke. And finally, we have Camilla Hjortkjær, who is a curator at Greve Museum, and she's also a PhD student at RUC, Roskilde University. And she will be giving a talk about some of the historical aspects and the significance of collecting and documenting sound as part of our cultural heritage. So to round things up, we will have a discussion where all of your questions are very, very welcome. I will just stop sharing here and say hello to you, Camilla, as well. You just jumped in here in the last minute.
Thank you.
And I think actually we are ready to leave the floor to Johan. So Johan, please take it away.
Yes, thank you. I just have to manage to share screen. Is everything looking good now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Johan Arnfeldt from Moesgaard Museum, and I'm manager of the exhibition technology team, which is a sub-department of the Moesgaard Museum exhibition design studio. The agenda for my presentation here will be like this, that first I'm going to tell you a bit about the exhibition design studio, and then I will show you some examples, tell a bit about them on how we're using sound design, and lastly I will tell you about the design and production process and the implementation process. I will also get a bit into technology, but not very much. So if you are having any questions, you're welcome to ask. Well, Moesgaard Museum, the new museum, which I'm going to talk about, opened in 2014. The exhibition design studio was established 18 months prior to the opening, where the idea was to collect a team of curators, architects, media designers, interaction designers, scenographers, and technicians, so that it would be possible to have a very close interdisciplinary collaboration in the design process. I think you have experience into that field, some of the attendees, and it sometimes is quite difficult to coordinate all the design process between too many actors sitting apart. The exhibition design studio has been doing new special exhibitions each year since 2015. And during all those exhibitions, we have tried to elaborate on how to use sound design, and it has become quite a big part of how we do exhibitions. We haven't got a sound designer in-house at Moesgaard, but during all the special exhibitions, we have been using Søren Bendiksen as sound designer, just except one exhibition, which was more like a big movie. So we got a sound designer from the movie industry, Morten Gren, to do that project. But it's a tight co-work between Søren Bendiksen, which is doing the sound design, and me, because the technology is very important in the sound design, and it's like two things that just has to play together. Since 2018, we have also been doing a lot of exhibitions out of house. It's like Nyborg Castle, Hex Museum of Witch Hunt in Ribe, Danish Jewish Museum in Copenhagen, Großraden in Germany, Museum Uatachi in Aarhus, and some other projects we are working on right now. As I told before, sound design has become an important part of our exhibition design. It's also because we are also always trying to make these immersive exhibitions where we're sort of making a theatrical setting around the artifacts, trying to get people in a mood, in a place, to make a total experience. And it's our experience that the sound design is a very key factor to visitor engagement. It's like when you have this immersiveness, people are they're dedicated to the learning processes. They are dedicated to being together with the other visitors they have been going with. But the exhibitions are very different, and therefore we have to have different approaches to the sound design. This is a wall of the special exhibitions we have done so far. An exhibition has a theme, a story, a topic, place, time, perhaps a mood. Is it a good thing or a bad thing we are going to tell about? There can be some actions, there can be a narrative which is important to follow. Besides that, there's a physical design of the exhibition. Our exhibition room is like 1,000 square meters, and it's one big open room. Sometimes we are dividing the room into several rooms with walls. Most often it's just fabrics that is hanging down. But there is a physical design, and there is a scenography, which is very yeah, we have to place all the speakers somewhere, and also it makes the physical design makes some typical constraints. There is most often a sound spill. You can hear one sound design in one area of the exhibition in another area. There are no sweet spots when you are doing exhibitions. When you're doing sound design for movie or a lot of other stuff, then you have sweet spots. But the visitors are wandering around, so no sweet spots. We have to make a speaker placement and arrangement. The placement is where we can place the speakers in the exhibition, and the arrangement is how we distribute the sounds. In short. Also, there are different duration of visits. Some are going a quick tour in the exhibitions. Others are being there for a long time. So it's also some constraints in relation to the narrative. And then there is a lot of other media installations, typical. And we have to integrate the sounds of those installations, or sometimes the video, the visual parts of the installations in the overall sound design. So now I'll just run through some very short, brief examples of how we can use sound design. The first is, we could call it the temple with hidden walls. It's our first special exhibition about the first emperor in China and the terracotta warriors. We had a temple in the big exhibition room with only one wall, as you can see in the picture. The other walls wasn't there, but we wanted to give the feeling of being in a temple. So instead of using walls, we used 28 speakers placed where we would have walls, and then some microphones and 4 speakers in the middle, representing the speakers you can see on the picture. They are musicians and are playing on old instruments. They are playing, their signal is dry from the 4 speakers in the center. They are in the ceiling, you can't see them. And the sound of the musicians, the tracks of the musicians, and the microphones, which are capturing the visitors, their voices, their footsteps, and so on. All these inputs are processed live in 24 channels, making this, you can call it fake room. And it was quite impressive for us, because it was our first time doing a special exhibition and playing with sound in this way. But it was also impressive to see how it affected the audience. They suddenly got quiet and was whispering like in a church. And it was very clear that it had an effect. So it's quite difficult to work with all this live audio processing, but very, very interesting. Immersive sound, we are almost always using immersive sound. It's also quite a fluffy word, and very hyped, but yeah, it fits all right. In Roos exhibition, we did a room called Hagia Sophia, where we tried to model, to visualize the old church in Istanbul. Here we used room tone. Every room has a tone which are affecting our way of perceiving where we are. So we used a sort of recorded room tone and some reverb plugins and placed the speakers high and low, so the sound was reproduced where they normally would come from. So when you entered this room, you suddenly was in a church, and it was also it worked quite well. Another way of using immersive sound is the more like surround way, where we, for example, did it in Out of Chaos, where we had this very big open space in the middle. We placed 21 speakers and arranged them as surround a surround system, but not Dolby Atmos or anything. But I'll get back to that. And then there was happening sometimes the sound design was out in the corner and representing some old people, and other times it was like this big battle with horses rounding around, and a lot of weapons and disaster. Yeah, and I can see my time is running. So yeah, I'll just be a bit quicker. The design process, we of course start with an exhibition concepts, finding artifacts, finding the narrative, finding the mood. There are some architects and scenographers together with the curators that is making a concept. Then we are going to design the sound design concept. How can we accept? How can we? How will the sound spill be? Where can we place speakers? We're going to look into the other media installation, dependencies, relationships, and how to embed them. Most often we're using a wheel of time because we are always synchronizing everything so it fits together. Every visual part has a time that is made into this time wheel. And then we're doing the sound designs, which consists of several sub-designs. The sub-design is most often an area of the exhibition. Then we're going into the speaker placement and arrangement. How can we distribute and spatialize the sound? Spatialization is so important to make this immersive sound designs. We are trying to find out which audio formats we're going to use. Most often we are using a system called SPAT, SPAT Revolution, because it's so flexible. We can place speakers exactly where we want to place speakers and spatialize the reverb and the sounds, the movement of the sounds. We can animate sounds, automate sounds in this setup. And then the sound design is taking place with curating which sounds are they historically correct, and so on and so on. It's a lot of work. Sometimes we're using music. It has to be composed and so on. We're emulating the speaker placement for this process, and then Søren is doing some preliminary mixes of the sound designs. Then we're going to implement it, and our experience is that there are one way of doing this, and it's on-site mixing. So we are sitting with these often like 50 discrete sound channels, and mixing it live in the exhibition. Um, it's an iterative process because some of the ideas may not work and or can be better. So Søren is going home, trying to elaborate on the sound designs and getting back, and we are mixing once again. Technology, very brief, to make sound designs this way, where we also are, working on the subconscious level. We have to reproduce sounds very good because otherwise it will not work. You are not you have to perceive the sounds real, and that's why high quality equipment is necessary. Then we also need synchronization because everything is connected on a timeline. It's one big sound design. And then it's also very good if it's flexible, because if we are doing all the cabling before we have done the mixing, we cannot change it. So the more flexible, the better. And now I have used too much time. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you
for
very
now.
much. Thank you very much, Johan. Now, please, everyone, leave your questions if you have one for Johan or some of the other speakers. But I have one for you here, Johan, because you're talking about the design with immersive audio, immersive sound.
Yeah.
How do you evaluate and adjust this immersive sound? Is it, I guess it's in the room, but is it by just sitting at a table, or is it moving around, or how do you evaluate your design?
We are moving around, and normally we're working first on one part. It's also about what is the key installations. There's some, perhaps it's an installation where there's some action that we have to get out in the room. So it could be sort of a key installation. Then we start out with that design and make, okay, it's there now, it's good. And then we add the other designs. They are made, they are prepared, but start mixing that way around and moving around in the exhibition, working the workstation around, walking around, and so on.
Great, thank you. We have a lot of questions coming in already, I can see. So there's one quick one here. How many hours do you approximately use to make an installation or exhibition?
Total hours or hours in sound design?
I guess with sound design here.
Whoa, it's difficult. I think like at least for the sound design alone, about 150 hours, but that's without all the technical stuff and the infrastructure and the system design. So it's like 150, 200 hours more.
Right.
And that's because we have a very flexible system. We're using Dante, and I used to use it, so it's so flexible.
Great, thank you. There's one more here. Are you inviting in test persons? I'm guessing audience, or is it only testing it yourself?
For the sound design, it's mainly Søren, the sound designer, and I. And then inviting some of the staff that has a relationship to the exhibition as well. But we are always in that shortness of time, so we are not able to invite others in. It would be interesting though.
Right. Thank you very much. I think we'll leave it at here and pass the word to CEO of Yoke and founding partner, Jesper Harding. And thank you very much, Johan.
You're welcome.
Hi, guys. My name is Jesper, and I'm the CEO of Yoke. I'm going to just tell you a tiny bit about Yoke while these images are flying across the screen. And then after a brief introduction, I'll pass on the word to Alexander, who will dive into one of the projects, the many projects that we have collaborated on in recent times. Some of the stuff you see here is some of the projects that we've been working on. Yoke is an experience design studio based in Copenhagen. We do exhibition design and experience design for cultural institutions, museums, and so on, as well as commercial clients, companies doing a branded space or a showroom or something like that. That means that we produce exhibitions using tons of different types of designs, which is both spatial designs and graphical designs and so on. And of course, also the audio design, which is also a big part of all our projects. And actually, we started 15 years ago, and me and some of the other partners have a background in music creation and audio design, even in a university level. And actually, the first project we ever did before starting the company was an audio installation in Struer at Struer Museum, where we created a reactive installation where the movement of the guests would trigger different sounds in a spatial setting. And we realized that if you can make money from doing projects like this, maybe there's a way for us to start up like a business doing interactive design and exhibition design. So that's sort of where we came from. For us, the audio part of our work has always been quite important to us. To us, audio and sound, immersive soundscapes and stuff like that has almost like a magical quality, and it's something that we've been really fighting for along the way. The problem about audio, as we see it, is that it's super difficult to explain in words. You almost need to experience it yourself before you understand how important it is and how big of a change or it can create in an exhibition or in an installation. So it's something that we have always been quite proud of and doing and found quite important for all of our projects. And audio is always a part of our projects, whether it's interface sounds or feedback sounds or speak stories told with voices or more ambient soundscapes. So it's always there, but we feel that it's always a bit of a struggle to come across with why sound is so important. So that's something that is quite important to us. One of the projects that we are working on right now, which is something that we are incredibly happy that finally there's a museum that takes sound to a different level and is really putting emphasis on the sounds, which is a project we're working on with the Museum of Copenhagen, which is called Sounds of the Capital. And it's just to say that we're so happy that finally we can really dive into what the sounds are. We are creating an exhibition with the museum about Copenhagen, how Copenhagen have changed over the last many hundred years in terms of how it has sounded. So what sounds were in the capital 100 years ago or 200 years ago? How have that changed over the years, and how have our perspective of those sounds also gradually changed? What is noise? How do we perceive something like noise? Why is it a noisy sound, or why isn't it? And those are some of the themes that we'll be going into the exhibition. Of course, doing an exhibition design like this means that we really want to emphasize all the sounds. We want to create, and this is just like a very preliminary sketch of the space, but we imagine a space that is quite dark, where you leave most of the experience to hearing instead of all the visual aspects, which we find quite interesting because it is always the other way around. So in this case, we're really getting into the sound itself. We're doing that by creating across the space like an overall soundscape that has sort of the feeling of the present Copenhagen. How is the sound of the city today? And then moving backwards through some audio experiments and some audio journeys where we dive more into the sounds themselves. What is this sound made of? How does this sound change in relation to the stones on the road or the surfaces on the buildings surrounding where the sound comes from? And also going into like different experiences that the people of Copenhagen have had over the years with the people selling fish on the market in 100 years ago, or the carriage with horses driving through the streets, or the church bells, or what have you. There's plenty of stories to dive into, but it's nice to finally be able to actually do so much with sound as opposed to more visual things. So we're quite happy about that. Now I'll just quickly introduce another project, and then Alexander, we have been working with over the years a lot. He'll go more in depth with this project. It's a project called Life Eternal that we did last year with the Nobel Prize Museum in Stockholm, where we were like the media partner for this exhibition, diving into the aspects surrounding like the eternal life. And of course, this is lots of different work, and it's all based on the Nobel laureates' different work put out in different types of installations, where we go in a bit into things like artificial intelligence, where you can discuss the eternal life with an AI called Clara, and other media backdrops telling some of all these fantastic scientific stories. And one of those, and probably more, I know that Alexander will go into. So I'll pass on the word to him, unless, of course, there are some questions, and we can also do that afterwards. So thank you.
That's great, Jesper. Thank you very much. Let's move on quickly to Alexander.
Yes, thank you. 2 seconds, I will share screen here.
Let me just quickly present you again, Alexander. We had Simon Marksen calling in ill for Yoke, so we have not one, but actually two in his place here today. And one was CEO Jesper Harding, and other one is Alexander Rye, sound designer, who's working in close collaboration with Yoke. So please take it away, Alexander.
Thank you. Can you see my presentation now?
Yeah, thank you.
Super. Yeah, so thank you for that. I will get back to the Nobel Prize Museum case in a minute. Just first of all, I'm gonna talk a bit about my perspective designing sound for museums. So I'm a sound designer, composer, multimedia artist, and primarily working with sound and music composition for exhibitions, spatial installations, and media. And I'm educated at Sonic College as a sound designer there, and working with and employed as former at Yoke as a sound designer for the last couple of years, and doing soundscapes, interactive sounds, and sound for films in that case of doing sound for different museums. It's a lot of different things, both like a traditional way of making sound for traditional museums, like the one you see above, making some soundscape for some objects, or maybe more like interactive sound for games, especially at Yoke, and doing more immersive installations also. So many different projects. But I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about the Life Eternal project. As Jesper mentioned quite a lot about it, so I won't get into detail about the exhibition in general, but I'm gonna focus a bit more on one of the rooms. We called that room 7, which is also about Clara and the sun, which is inspired by this Nobel Prize winner who made the book Claire and the Sun. And when I got into this project, I was the overall concept and the spatial design was already kind of approved and was there was already made some concept drawings and some storyboards. And then I came into in the early production phase, and one of the concepts was that sound and light should be in sync with each other and very closely attached to each other. So the idea was to create like a 5-minute ambient light loop in the whole room, which was going through the cycle of a day with the daylight, because that's also quite an important part of the book. So the overall soundscape should follow this loop in some sort of. And we had different sound sources or different sound scenes. First of all, the overall soundscape for the room, but also the thermal screen that you can see in the bottom on the table. We had some pulses of thin lights in this humanoid hanging in the room, and also in the brain we had some lights going on, and all of these sound sources should have some sounds which were synchronized with both the lights and the overall loop of the all. So yeah, the production of the soundscape was to find out what atmosphere we are going to wanted to achieve in the room. So I worked on creating like an atmospheric and musical soundscape. So it's much more like a musical drone-ish sound, and it's regular sound you hear from the world. And I wanted to have it like have some warmth, some hopefulness, some curiosity in the sound, because the book that it's based on is not very dystopian sci-fi with bots and so on. It has more curious and warm feel to it, because we follow through this humanoid or AI bot. So we wanted it to have it so that when there's the full daylight section, you could feel that some life is coming out into the room, and during the night, all of the effect sounds that I will talk about in a minute would come up instead, and the soundscape would drop down in volume and not just be very subtle during the night. And yeah, this was of course a longer process of trying different sounds and moods and so on. And I'm just quickly gonna play some of it. You can hear this. This was the start of the loop, and where the sun is rising, and it slowly moves towards the. Can you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's great. Thanks.
And when we get to 1 minute, we get to the full daylight scene. We have a little bit more life and a little bit more volume in the soundscape. In this choir voice, which was like symbol of bringing some life into the that the sun was coming out.
I'm sorry, Alexander. It's a bit difficult to hear you talk when the music's playing. It's a bit loud.
Sure, I'll just
But thank you.
What you can hear here is it evolves through this loop, and here at approximately 1 minute, you could hear the daylight. You could hear these choir voices coming up, and it was a symbol of the life coming out of the soundscape, and you can feel the sun rising. And then it slowly towards the end of the night will drop down in volume as well. So that was just a subtle sound for staging an atmosphere in the room while the night and the moon was going on. And here you had different effect sounds going on, both for the screen that you see here and sound effects to bring life into the objects, both the humanoid hanging in the ceiling and this screen. So I created some different digital pulsating glitchy sounds that was all in sync with the whole loop. So you had some downloading, uploading sound for the thermal screen, and you had some sounds for the brain and these thin lights. I can just quickly show some. So this was the content from the screen, and we put all of the sound in to check how it worked. Yeah, here you have some different digital sounds moving along with the visual part and sending, which was a representation of sending all the data to the humanoid during the night, and then it charges up during the day. And here in the night we have some different dreams going on. So I just made some glitchy effect sounds, and this beep sound just was close to the humanoid as a symbol of representing that there is still some life in this humanoid. Kind of like when you're on a hospital, you have this heart rate monitor beep going on. So it was kind of making the intersection between a human and a robot. Yeah, so all of these sounds, effect sounds, and this overall sounds were working together and should be closely synchronized with the lights. So I made this storyboard for the lighting designer for the exhibition to follow the sounds along with the different parts of the exhibition. So yeah, the blue, this is a screenshot from my working station, the top one. So you can see the effect sounds and you can see the overall soundscape. And then they could follow along this to make sure that all of the lights and the different parts of the project is in sync with these sounds. Yeah, and then of course there was some implementation, as Johan talked about earlier. Being in the room is often very important, I think, for making the best possible experience with the sound. So I was sitting in the room and adjusting the sounds on the spot, trying out. It was not the most complex speaker system in the world. It was 4 speakers in the ceiling, and we had 2 around the table and the door for the effect sounds. And I tried them out, and of course all of the aspects of the production was working simultaneously as we were close to the deadline of the opening. So I couldn't see all of the different elements together. But I just had to imagine some of the things. But I think in general it always works pretty good out, even though I can't see everything at once, of course, because people are working simultaneously. So yeah, it was a bit of a mess, as we might can see in this picture when I was there, but it came out great. And here you can see the whole feel of it. And I think it's just a nice product to show, a project to show, because it's you have both the light and the sound and the objects in a good showcasing the things in a good way and bringing life to this exhibition. So it's not just objects in the table, but bringing some life to the whole experience with both sound and light. Yeah, so quickly in general about my role and the collaboration between, for instance, Yoke and the museum and other partners involving in this project. I communicate quite a lot with it. It depends, of course, on the project, what needs to be done. But I often communicate a lot with, of course, the exhibition design team, the project managers, the designers, and the developers on the team, sending back and forth ideas and sound files to hear what they say, and of course also the museum and the curators to hear their opinion on what they want to have, and if it's the right way to go. And of course there can also be other partners like AV technicians or other media partners involved. For instance, if I want to, I can communicate with the AV technicians about setting up the right speakers or setting up different things in the room. So yeah, there's a lot of communication back and forth during the whole process with many partners involved in the project. Of course, if it's a very visually project where you have like a film or protection I need to make some sound for. Of course, I'm in a close collaboration or communication with the visual designer doing that. Yeah, just a quick overview of some of the thoughts that go into the process. Sometimes I'm in the early stages of the concept of detailing, and sometimes I only get along in the production phase. So yeah, it depends a lot on the project and the budget and the time and so on. But of course, I always like to be as early as possible in the process. So some of the things I tend to think about working with the concept could be what sounds could I use, are any specific sounds, references, and so on. What are the motion, the moods we are going for, and what is this general setup. And then I record a lot. I find and create a lot of related sounds and trying out different things and erasing sounds as I go, which I don't like. And of course, sending back and forth from the client, the colleagues, and so on to get some feedback on what they think. And of course, testing and prototyping as well, as good as I can, and try to mimic the exhibition as good as we can. So trying out on big speakers or in a similar room is also very important. Yeah. So final thing, I would just say that sound should of course be used wisely. I love making sound for museums, and I think it's a really good part of it. But it's of course also important to ensure that it enhances the experience rather than overpowering. And therefore, I think it should be thought of in every stage of the process, not just the last part of the production. Because if you proper plan it and design it from the start off, you'll get a better result. Is my experience with working with sound. Yeah, that was it, I think.
That's great. Thank you very much, Alexander. That was really interesting. I have a quick question here for you.
Yeah.
So you're talking about you're using the room in the implementation stage.
Yeah.
Do you use the room also in a creation process, or is it only in a mixing process?
I don't often use the room as that I go there and see the room, or of course I want to think the room in the project already from the beginning. So how is the room? Is it a large room? Is it a small room? What are the setup? I'm not going there and producing on the spot until I have the pretty much it all done, and then I mix it. So yeah, I try to think of it in as early as possible, but yeah, it's mainly mixing in the end for getting the best results, I think.
Right. Thank you. That's a question here from Anders. What are some typical technical difficulties that you encounter? And are they easy to fix again?
Technical difficulties. It depends what we are talking about. I think there's of course some technical difficulties about implementing the sounds into the museums, doing with the right speakers. Is it going to be immersive? Is it going to be real time? Is it going to be just a playback from looping some sort of from amplifier? So depends. Of course, so yeah, and some of the difficulties I think is also that knowing what's gonna work when you are sitting at home or at the office doing the sound, and not really know how it's gonna sound in the end. So that's why it's of course important to try it out as much as you can before it's yeah. Going up.
Right. Thank you very much. I can see that there's a lot of questions coming in, and we'll take some of the questions in the end as well. So I think I'll just say thank you to you, Alexander, and I will leave the floor to our next speaker, who is Camilla Hjortkjær from Greve Museum. She's a curator at Greve Museum. and she will be giving a talk. So it's all yours, Camilla.
I just needed to unmute myself. My screen is sharing. Can you see it now?
Yes, but we had some problems with your
I don't
screen.
know. Maybe now.
Is it on slideshow?
Yeah, it is. I don't know why I can't see my own screen.
It's the same problem, I'm afraid. As,
yes, it is.
Yes.
Well, can you see it?
That's
just
better. Yeah.
In this way, I'll just do it.
That'll have to do.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. In my presentation, I will try to go maybe a bit back to what was also spoken about from Jörg about the project at Copenhagen Museum. It relates a bit to that, but this is from my museum. I'm from Greve Museum and Nosede Fort. I will delve a bit into sound history and the significance of collecting and documenting sound as an integral part of our cultural heritage. My practical outset is that I'm a curator at a cultural history museum, Greve Museum and Nosede Fort. I have been responsible for the museum's collection for at least 15 years now. And first of all, the collection of objects, but since 2012-13, I and my colleagues have integrated sound in the collection and in the exhibitions. How can sound be considered cultural heritage is one of the questions we have been asking ourselves, and which methods can be used or developed or combined in the museum's collection of sound, if the museum should collect sound. First of all, I will give you a few quotes from different scholars. This is from Sophia Rosenfeld, and she says, first and most basically, it is axiomatic that every culture produces different sounds. And these sounds are part of our auditory landscape, the soundscape or sonic environment, or whatever we will call it, specific to every culture. I actually had some sound examples, but I don't think I can share them. But I can actually just mime them. One of them is a little bell ringing in the streets. And if you are from Denmark, you will know that this is the sound of ice cream, the ice cream truck, or what we call Hjemmeis. Now I just realized it's changed its name, but I still think that the bell is there. For 1.5 years ago, I spent a few months in Vancouver in Canada, and several times I heard this little sound of a small melody, and looked out the window, and after a few times that I heard it, I found out that this is the sound of the ice cream truck in Canada and also in the United States, I think. So this is just a very simple example of how a specific sound is part of the culture, the auditory landscape that surrounds us. But now to the matter that some context matters, because how do we share the past sounds? The sound scholar, he's actually called himself sense historian, Mark M. Smith, points out in this text, and when we ask ourselves, how do we share the past sound? Should we attempt to recreate those sounds? Or are such efforts misleading because modern habits of hearing and listening cannot have the same meanings to us as they did to various constituencies in the past? Mark M. Smith, among other scholars, uses what he calls historical acoustemology. It's a method to analyze and understand what roles sound, noises, and silences played for people in historical, social, and political context, or you could also call it a socio-cultural context. I'm not as skeptical as Mark M. Smith about using sound in the exhibition, but I agree that when we use it, we have to be aware of the perception of the sound, whether it's sound we can record, as it exists today, or whether it's sound that needs to be recreated. If we want to recreate the sound of Copenhagen in 1800 something, then we usually have to recreate it in some way. But the sound can expand our understanding of the human experience, and that is why it's still interesting to try and recreate not only the sound, but also the perception of sound, how people listened. An example of how it can be misunderstood, or maybe not, just probably told. Then the Dutch sound historian Karin Bijsterveld has described an example from the Flanders Field Museum of how it's presented, how we in the present needs to be provided with knowledge about the listening situation to be able to understand the sound installations. In this museum, there's an oral experience of World War I battle scene, and the sound is very loud, and most visitors will interpret the sound as loud, terrible, and without any positive elements in it. It's war. But as she points out, the sound installation do not provide information about what the sounds meant to the soldiers. The installations does not convey how soldiers heard and how they understood those sounds. And the fact is that sound meant a lot for the soldiers. And she writes, men in trenches listened intently, distinguishing between sounds could mean their lives. So if you're here, yeah, very simple, if you hear the sound of a cannonball, it's actually too late. You will either be dead or it missed because of the speed of the sound. But they used the sound and the listening to know where the enemy was and to know what to do. So this is some of the information we could maybe consider also to give to our visitors. So I'm interested in how can museums collect sound and listening experience for the future. It's not a new thing to discuss whether we can make museums for sound. In 1977, 50 years ago, the soundscape artist Maurice Schaefer wrote, "Where are the museum for disappearing sounds? Even the most ordinary sounds will be affectionately remembered after they disappear. Their very ordinariness turns them into exceptional sound souvenirs." An example could be the ice cream truck sound, if it somehow disappears later in this century. And in a few years ago, in 2019, museum curator and sound studies scholar John Kannenberg has written, "It's my hope that institutions that are currently dedicated to the tangible begin to expand their collections to include more objects of intangible cultural heritage." And as I read it, I read that the Cultural History Museum should consider collecting sound just as we collect objects, the tangible objects. So how can it be collected? At the Greve Museum, we have carried out some sound documentation for the collection since 2012. We have tested different methods of collecting. The first 20 sound recordings were performed by me and a colleague. This is what I call the museum curated collecting of sound. We performed it, as you can see, with some microphones. We tried to make some binaural recordings where it's kind of, or what can you call it, 3D audio. That's why this head is on the beach. We went to some different shops. The Pet Store in 2012, it had been there since the 1970s. Now it's gone. So this would be kind of an example of the disappearing sounds. We got some really good sound collections, and some of the sound recordings were kind of problematic to us. So this led me on to how can we do it in another way. So it led me to try other methods of collecting. So in 2021, I invited local citizens to go sound walking with me. And after the sound walk we did together, every participant had to perform their own private sound walk and write a sound diary. The sound walk is a method that is used among other in sound art, architecture, urban planning, and a lot more. And during and after the sound walk, me and the participant had conversations about which sounds or sound environment that were important for them, the local identity and history. I'm convinced that we will develop this method further and will use it in the future collection of sound. We will probably also do our own sound collection, but by using the historical acoustomology as a method, it has become clear that it's necessary to include considerations about the meaning of sound and listening in the contemporary social cultural context. So the sound recording can serve to document local areas, characteristic location, environments where the sonic environment is changing or disappearing. But we need to be more specific about the listening situation and take that into our registration when we document and register the sound. This is a little picture of the sound diaries. I made them very analog. So I gave them this little book. They could write their notes about why they picked out a place in this group, where they did their private sound walks. They could put in maps, they could put in pictures. There was one woman who made this, and then they got a little microphone so they could go out and do some sound documentation. Actually, the sound recordings are really poor. But it kind of made, I think it had some meaning for them to have the microphone in the hand and go out and record and collect something. And if we need a better recording, we have to do it again. But the sound diaries are really valuable to us, because in this diary she writes about how all the thoughts about why she picked out this place. This is a place where she go almost every morning to buy a cup of coffee, sometimes to put gas on the car. And then she also has these considerations about, I wonder if we will hear this sound in 10 years when most of us will be going by electric car. So this was a learning from us, that we learned that it has a lot to do. It's very important to document the listening situation and all the things going around the sound. The latest registration we made at the museum was actually a few years ago. Maybe we should do some more soon. But I made a sound recording in March 2020. We almost forgot what happened then, but it was 2 or 3 weeks after everybody was sent home during COVID-19. And I made this collection of sound at the S train station in Hundi. I also made a sound recording 10 years earlier, and now it's kind of valuable to us to have 2 very different sound recordings from exactly the same place. And now in the museum's collection strategy is now mentioned that every time we make some collections, we also have to consider if we could also make sound documentation. We don't do it every time, but we have to consider it. And our hope and expectations are that over time, the museum will have a richer collection so that future generations will be able to research and be presented with a less silent history. So the last recording is not all quiet, but what's worth noting is that you have the same train sound, but no people there, and then you have this warning in the loudspeaker where someone says in Danish and English that people should keep their distance and get tested if they feel sick. So if you have forgot it, then we have it on sound in Greve Museum.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Camilla. That was super interesting, and there's still questions coming in here. I just have one here for you. What would you say are some of the most significant sound markers that you would go out and collect today?
It depends on where I am. But you can, if you use this vocabulary from Maurice Schaefer, actually invented 50 years ago, you can still use it because it's easy to hear when you say sound marks and sound signals. And the sound mark would be, this is what is very significant for a city. And if we just take Copenhagen, which I guess most people know, then of course I would take church bells, the traffic, which maybe not be a sound mark, but yeah, maybe something else. It could also be things less important, because and that's why I really noticed that it was helpful to have local citizens, because they all have their special local area. But you have to push people a bit to talk about something else than nature, sound of water, sound of birds. Not that it's not important, because it has very big importance in people's life. But of course, I would say sounds that is here, and we don't really notice them before they're gone. And I'm pretty sure you can make workshops in every local regional museum and ask, so which sounds have importance for you? And then maybe push them a bit about, it doesn't have to be nice sounds. It could also be when you live near to a big highway or a fabric or some factory. So I have been trying to say, okay, we don't only need the nice sounds, but we need to collect it and then kind of also collect the experience of the sound.
Right. And I'm also thinking that in this day and age, we have so many digital devices. So could a sound collection be a digital sound collection? Because when we go out in the world today, we have sounds created digitally as well. Could they?
Yeah, actually, when I made the sound recording in Hyundai station, I think one of the most significant sounds, except for the train, of course, is the sound of Rejsekortet. And that was actually something new compared to the first time. So all this digital sounds are part of our life. And I also heard someone say that sound of Corona was the sound of Teams and Zoom sounds calling up. So of course we have all the small digital sounds. I don't know if that was what you meant, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I think we will go back to a full conversation session here with all of you. So stop picking your nose and let's get to a nice conversation here. I would just like to kick things off with a question for you. Is sound in museums overrated? I don't know if any of you would want to answer.
No. Just like Jesper said, I think we can agree on that it's underrated.
I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Right. So the value of sound is being neglected mostly by the museums or the audience?
I think just like Johan, that the sounds are probably quite underrated. I don't think you can blame anyone for that. I think we have a responsibility as the creators of the exhibitions to like promote sound in general a bit more, because like I said before, that it is quite difficult to explain unless you experience it. So you almost need to create it before you can actually experience the value of it. And I think that's like an ongoing discussion for us, at least, and something that we really try to work on. How can we like convince a client or an audience that sound has this value?
So sounds difficult to sell. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm saying. And also because it has a lot of like practical implications in the museums that sometimes we have experienced that, we've created some soundscape, but then the people working at the museum that are listening to the same sounds over and over and over again, they tend to like go and turn it off because that's just more practical or better for them. And I totally get that and acknowledge that that is of course a problem. So I think there's a lot of exploration to be done in terms of creating solutions that are much more intelligent than what has been done previously. And of course, creating the soundscapes in a way that it doesn't disturb the audiences or the employees at the museum. But I think it's a very interesting conversation to have. How can we do that?
Right. So yeah.
I would also I agree with Jesper. I would also say in terms of one of the questions I got earlier about the main problem about it, and I also think that's why it's still an underrated thing, that it's really hard to isolate sound, because you can isolate a picture, you can isolate a video by or moving around, so you can't see it, but the sound is everywhere, so it spreads across all the rooms, and that's why it's really hard sometimes to work with, and doing it in a way so it's not interrupting the employees, or if you have different sounds going on in the same room, it can really sometimes be too much. So that's why it has to be thought of very well and be designed very well to work. And when it works really great. So that's why I think it's that's the problem why it's still a bit underrated,
Right.
or is underrated.
Yeah, and maybe, I don't know, Johan, if you maybe can answer this, but is there a technical solution to over here in museums, or is it more about knowledge about how you point the speakers and so on?
Of course, you can look into some acoustic damping and so on, but that's also annoying but fascinating. That sound is this physical entity. So you can't can't do that much. You can make it more directed if you cut out some of the low frequencies and so on, but then it's not naturalistic anymore, and so on. So, and I find it quite fascinating, but also annoying. The way we are doing is that we are designing the whole exhibition. Also, if it's in like the Museum of Witch Hunt in Ribe Hex, it's a normal, very old house with, I think, 8 or 11 rooms. And the sound design is around everywhere anyway. So we just have to look at it as one big sound design. You can have 2 actions happening at one time. And then you can use some tricks like, what can you say? Using the same sounds, the same ideas, but and of course play them in sync, and then sort of transform the sounds. So the visitors don't really get that it's the same because they perceive it as different sounds, but then they will not interrupt each other as much. So that there are different tricks.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. There's a question here about. Yep.
Sorry, I just have a short notice on the question about using technology. I think what also Moesgaard is doing with creating more immersive experience with sound that are more like complex than you would see maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It's really, I think it's gonna be a really good potential for overcoming some of the issues that we have, because with a more real-time, more complex system where you can take the sound sources and move them around in a room and make it more dynamic, so the sound is not happening all the time. It's not just one speaker in the corner just playing all the time, but you can make it much more dynamic, and you can also make it more interactive, so it's only maybe playing when someone is coming into the exhibition, so it's not disturbing everyone when no one is there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity about in this whole immersive sound that we are coming into to overcome some of the issues with sound in rooms. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. And I don't know, maybe if you can mute your microphone when you're not speaking, I think that would help a little bit. There's a question here about the sounds of the capital that you also, Camilla, were talking a bit about, and you, Jesper. Is it possible to use original sound, and how early back do you have recordings? Can you say anything about that? And how can you keep the authenticity to a sound that you reproduce? That's more than one question. Sorry.
That well, first of all, obviously there's a lot of the historical events that we don't have, where we simply don't have the sounds. But some of the events we have quite good descriptions of, like the crowning of Frederick II, I think, where there is a quite nice explanation of how that event took place, with the cannons firing and the horses riding and so on. And some of those sounds can be recreated in some sense today. A part of the project is actually a part about shoes, because at the museum they have a shoe expert, historical shoe expert, and she has done a project where we are recreating, like manufacturing actual shoes from 100 years ago or even 200 years ago that they have found. And then there's like a shoemaker in Germany that can reproduce these shoes, and we can use those shoes to recreate the sounds with that shoe on cobblestone or on different surfaces that you walk across. So you can historically try to make as accurate sounds as possible, but of course it's difficult to know that if you're nailing it or if it's, but you can get pretty close. And I'm not quite sure how far back we have sounds. I mean, we have some like from the first like predecessor of the phonograph or the record player, like, and that's quite old. I can't remember the year. And of course some of this is also like a mission about putting the guests into like using their imaginations, like what would the city sound like, how would this have been, and we can help them by recreating some of the sounds and in a way, but it's tricky, definitely.
Yeah, I've heard Jakob Parby, who's from Copenhagen Museum, telling about this project, and what's really exciting for me is also that he's going into he's reading about and finding texts about how people lived with the sound and the noise, and what was noise for them. People are complaining. You can read in this journal called Politivinden, the police friend, what people are complaining about. They're complaining about the blacksmith noise, or complaining about people going in horse wagons. And today, that's why it's important for me to say that this method of historical acoustomology is important to also to try to give to people visiting the museum and listening to the sound. Because when we hear the sound of a horse wagon in the streets, it's kind of romantic, isn't it? But it's not very nice if you have a lot of horse wagons. That was noise for people. Exceptionally, if it was, especially if it was early in the morning, people yelling to try to sell their things. That actually made, the people making new laws about where they could sell and how and why. So that is what is really important about the historic sounds. And yes, you can recreate them pretty good, better than the old recordings because they're really poor. And then of course you have possibility to recreate a very few sounds like one-to-one. We still have the same church bell. Here in Greve, in Kildebrønde Kirke, the church bell is from 1500 something, 25. That is still the same sound. But what is important is that it's not listened to in the same way. I can hear the exact same sound as they could hear in 1500 something. But when I hear the church bell, I do not think about, oh, it's time to go to church. I just hear it in a totally different way. So that's what can be important, and what is worth discussing about this authenticity.
And I also maybe just touch upon this authenticity, that one of the points about making this exhibition with the sounds of the capital is not necessarily recreating the sounds exactly like they were, because that might not even be the point. One of the stories that we want to tell is that we all perhaps maybe have the impression that the city was more quiet in the old days. And that's one of the surprises to us, that it wasn't. It was just as hectic and noisy as it is today, maybe even more so. And in that sense, it's not maybe super important that we recreate the sounds exactly the way they were, but just that we tell that story. So
that's very interesting, because I've heard that too, that smell was the worst pollution in the early days, and now is noise. But yeah, maybe you're saying that it was both in the early days. Okay, a lot of questions coming in here. I'm not sure we can answer all of them, but there's Paul here is asking something about key points of inspiration. Maybe you can give some ideas for a curator to prompt your process if you're new to involving sound in exhibitions. As a curator, I'm guessing here. Do you have any suggestions? Or maybe you can give some advice to what's the most important thing for a successful exhibition with sound.
Well, I can say something from the small museum. It's also possible, even though you're not Moesgaard Museum. You can. I think it's for us. It has been important to start, and that's the same with Moesgaard. I think to bring it into the plans right away, not in the end. And I think some of you also say was the I know Alexander maybe who said bring it in from the start. Have it into the plans, and it can be simple. You can buy not that priceable equipment to start, just to try it out. We have some small little loudspeakers with a motion sensor on that we use in our smaller exhibitions, in special exhibitions, so we can put some sound in without any large extra costs. So get it in your plans right away. Just discussing. So could we make sound installations? Could we put in music or speech, or should it be a soundscape from this place we want to recreate? It is possible without having millions of kroner.
I can maybe add that I think it's also just important that you start having a conversation about sound in an exhibition, that sound can be so many things, that you can start imagining this story that we have here about Vikings or about biology or whatever it is, that it might have a sound. What does this story, what does it sound like? And that can be both, like you say, Camilla, like speak, like an oral story that you can tell, but it could also just be the emotional side of a story, like that you can take the visitor to a different place simply by adding like a little drone sound in the space that puts them into a different mindset. And it could be simple things like that, but I think it just starts with that you start thinking about the sounds in general. And like you say, Camilla, it doesn't have to be complicated or expensive to do some simple tricks that can really enhance the experience.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I just want to say that, yeah, try and maybe just talk with someone who knows a bit about sound, or a sound designer, or an exhibition design team who knows something about sound. It doesn't have to be like a big project, but maybe just ask, do you think it could make sense to make some sort of sound here? And of course, I and other sound designers have a good background to maybe quickly say if there is something that makes sense doing in sort of an exhibition, and it can be, as Jesper said, just a tiny little thing, or a little bit of sound, or it could be a lot bigger. So yeah, just getting it in the conversation as early as possible, as Camilla also mentioned.
Johan, you look like you wanted to add something.
No, not really. I totally agree, and I also think it's the change starts from the mindset. You have to see it as a thing, and the cost. I don't think it's that pricey. It's just like if you want a new thing, of course it costs, but you know, projectors, displays, and so on, they are more expensive. So it doesn't have to be expensive.
Right. Okay, so if you want to go out and collect inspiration, besides Moesgaard and Greve and some of the places you've been having exhibitions, do you have any good tips to where to go and seek sound installations?
I'm all
I
ears.
have just visited an installation. It's not a museum, but an installation in London called Frameless. It was the sound design was very good, and that's not that often we experience that. So it was a great place to visit.
Well, I was very inspired by. I really like a lot of Danish exhibitions. Actually, it's always fun, nice to go abroad. But there's some very good Danish museums. I went to Den Gamle By in Aarhus. The exhibition called Aarhus Fortæller. I don't know if any of you have been in making some for that, but they have a lot of small sound installation and a lot of other things, but it's a very good exhibition. People kind of forget that there's an exhibition there because you go to the old city to see the houses, but it's I find it very inspiring. And then I have been inspired by art museums, and tried to borrow or steal some of the ideas you see artists do. There's a lot of good inspiration in other kind of museum than and for art museums, maybe they could go and see some cultural history museums and get inspired. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I will just share my screen here so you can see the beautiful panel of experts in sound in museums. I want to thank the four of you for joining this webinar. If you want to go seek these people on social media, I'm sure that they will accept your questions and inquiries. I also want to, on behalf of Danish Sound Cluster, I would like to thank you all for joining this webinar. You can follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. When you exit this webinar, there will be a questionnaire where you can answer just a few questions about this webinar. We'd be very thankful if you would like to do that. So I hope to see you some other time. And once again, thank you so much for joining this webinar. It's been a pleasure and very interesting talk and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.